Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Stephanie, and on today's episode of our Relationship Podcast, I'm going to be talking about pets. I'm going to be talking about couples and their pets, or if you're dating and you have a pet and you're meeting someone that doesn't or that does have one, and all the pros and cons that come with having a fur baby. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to give you specific pets for different types of people. So if you're a traveler, I know even during COVID, people still have to travel for work. Or if you're a more anxious person, I'm going to give you the different specific pets that are perfect for you. So make sure you stick around for that. So let's get started. We are going to start with how pets can actually affect relationships. So the first article I'll start with from the Meaford Independent. They did a study written by Brandon Forder. He conducted the study, and the title of the article is The Pet Expert: Having Pets Can Affect Your Relationships. Wow, that's news. But yeah, this study was done the end of last year, so September 2019. And he found in a survey that approximately 86% of pet owners would break up with a new romantic partner who didn't like their pet. Is that true for you guys? Let us know on our Instagram or Twitter, GSMC_relationship. But I would actually really like to know how many people would actually break up with their new partner who didn't like their pet. I think I'd be one of those people. I really love animals. So if I had a pet before I met my partner and they didn't like them, I would be like, well, then, I'll find someone who does. But they said in the study, for longer term relationships existing 1 year or more, almost all respondents participating in the survey confirmed that their pet would still take priority, and they would end a relationship if it meant choosing between a pet or a partner. So what I failed to mention in the beginning of the episode is what inspired me to do this is that me and my partner have decided we're getting a pet. So that requires a lot of research, and that's what I'm sharing with you guys, because maybe like us, you guys have more time for a pet, or you're more settled than you were previously. I'm not sure what your circumstance is, but that's our circumstance. And moving forward, we kind of planned it out that I would always be home with a pet. So it's not just COVID that's allowing us to be home. It's also other circumstances in our lives that allow me to always be home for a pet if we do get one. So anyways, to go back to the survey, it found that a potential partner not liking someone's pet was worse than having a poor sense of fashion, being a bad tipper, or not even wanting kids. And I thought that was incredible. Now, not everyone wants kids, but just like how incredible it is to me that some people would leave their partner for not liking their pet more than they would for not wanting kids, which is interesting. But the survey specifically looked at relationships where the pet was in the picture before the new relationship began. And many believe that in the instance of bringing a new pet into a relationship and discovering their partner didn't like it, that would be ground for a breakup. For pet lovers, this information comes as no surprise, but I think it is fair to represent all people. So not just the people who love animals, but the people who don't like pets for many reasons. Some of the reasons listed in this study are that many people simply aren't animal lovers to the same degree as others, which is fair, but also why? Just kidding. And some people just may prefer only cats while others prefer only dogs. And sometimes that cat or dog may not like them back. And just a side note, I mean, this makes sense that you're more likely to struggle with your partner not liking your pet because there's a couple factors here. In your head, your pet is amazing. And your pet, like, has their little quirks, but, you know, they're not for everybody. But it makes perfect sense because you don't have these conversations, at least I don't think of these conversations when I'm meeting someone new, when I'm dating someone. I kind of just assume that everyone's going to love my fur baby because I love my fur baby. So it's not so much like that question of wanting kids. That's obviously talked about time and time again, you know, from relationship experts saying like, hey, if you want a partnership with this person long term, make sure you talk about having kids. That should be critical to that relationship. But what they fail to bring up is, you know, having pets and how important that is to people, especially if you don't want kids and you just want pets, or if you never want pets. Like, how scary is that conversation for someone who doesn't like animals to the rest of the world, because seemingly the world at large, or how it's presented, doesn't leave room for people that don't like pets. So that's why I wanted to make sure they got represented as well, because they're less likely to. But yeah, so back to the study. It says, among the study participants, the most glaring concerns between partners in a relationship are disputes about boundaries. So a 2015 survey found that about 70% of pet owners allow their pets to sleep on the bed. That means only 30% of pet owners would prefer to have their dog on the floor at night. For a new partner, especially a romantic one, they may not want a third wheel in bed. So these are all considerations to take in. Stuff I haven't thought about before because I tend to just be drawn towards another animal lover. But in this particular relationship that I'm in right now, I would definitely say that I'm more of an animal lover than he is. So these are definitely things to be concerned about, even if you are with someone who loves pets. So it just goes on to say that there's various different circumstances why, if you are not at the same level of loving a pet as your partner or a potential partner, then you definitely need to have that conversation at the beginning of a relationship, because they cause other factors, right? Like, pets are expensive and, you know, you can't really leave if you have a puppy. So you're stuck to being at home and you can't be spontaneous. So you can't do like a romantic weekend getaway. You have to plan for that. And I have personal experience with that. Like, there's a lot of situations where having a dog, which I don't have, but would cause you to not be able to leave at spur of the moment. So I know how much work that can be, and I also know that's very true. So I thought it was really interesting to get a general look at how pets can affect relationships and the questions to ask while you're dating, to make sure that you have a partner that loves pets just as much as you. It makes all the burdens of having a pet a lot easier, and all the good stuff too, right? All right, so now we're going to go to a different article, and it's just asking, like, can pets improve your relationship? So I thought this was an interesting question to ask, because the theme of all of my podcasts are how to improve and, you know, keep your relationship stable and healthy. And so I really liked this article, especially because it was done recently in the last year, and it was done by Suzanne Phillips, who's a psychologist. And so she wrote this blog about how pets can improve your relationship. And she asked a couple questions that kind of get you to think about how pets affect our relationships. So some of the things people ask are like, what happens between people and their pets that accounts for this emotional outpouring of love? And most answer with the responses like, you know, the dog demands nothing from me. He just gives unconditional love. But is that even true? Or are we just more accepting of what pets need? Like, pets aren't demanding. That's really interesting, because like, pets are always demanding. You know, if you're a pet owner, you know those moments when your cat lays on your face in the morning. That means you need to get up and feed your cat, or your dog's pouncing on you, ready for their morning walk. So animals are definitely demanding, and so saying that, like, they demand nothing from you and they just give you unconditional love isn't technically true. And what she wants us to get away from asking that type of question is, like, to recognize that the demands that your pet has on you, like you accept those. So why wouldn't you accept some of the demands that your partner puts on you? And why is an animal more accepted than your person? So, she's saying that we can learn something from our relationships with pets that might enhance our relationship with partners. So, to do that, she says, you get what you give. So maybe you give something very positive to your pet that invites unconditional love and the connection that you feel. So that has the potential to enhance the relationship with your person as well. So to question this and to kind of see if you can get what you give, she asks, can you credit yourself with any of the following? So greetings. So no matter how you feel, what mood you're in, you greet your pet with a positive, even animated hello, and often with a display of physical affection. Do you do that with your person? What about your expectations? With pets, maybe it's your lack of expectation that makes a difference. You probably rarely predict that your pet will be angry if you're late. As a result, you don't head home defensively, angry in preparation for the reaction you expect to face. And I think that is such a huge realization that, no, I don't expect anything from my pet. So it makes me always happy to see them because I only have positive reinforcements. So that's something to think about. Can you credit yourself with holding grudges? So when you do return home to find that your cats have redecorated the room with shreds of every tissue they could find, or the dog has eaten some of the mail, you may well react with a choice of expletive, but you're not likely to hold the grudge. You're also still going to be petting Donatello or cuddling with Thor the next day, which these names are hilarious. I love them. Donatello, hello, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Any reiteration is good for me. And then Thor, not all iterations of that are good, but some are quite handsome. But I digress. So I think holding grudges is a good one too. You definitely hold grudges with people, but I've never held a grudge against my animal. I just feel like my pet is an animal. So they're why would I have expectations? But again, they are demanding and they are a handful. So why do we see them differently? So she continues to say, can you credit yourself with assuming the best? So there's a natural tendency to forgive pets their trespasses. After all, the dog wasn't trying to torture you by eating the mail. Was your partner really trying to torture you by putting it in such a safe spot it can't be found? So, if our partner gets the mail and they put it somewhere we can't find, all they were trying to do really was to make sure that it was safely tucked away, maybe in a spot you didn't think of was convenient, but they thought was. And the point is are you assuming the best out of your partner, which I think we should all really think about. The next one is acceptance. And so it goes on to say, few pet owners personalize their pets' reactions to others to an extreme that makes them so embarrassed that they fear their image is tarnished or they become resentful of their pets. The fact that the dog is licking every part of the arriving guest's body is cause to pull him away or laugh it away. The cat that will not come out of hiding or the parrot that is screeching is left without judgment or excuses. That's them. That's who they are. So what this one is actually saying is just, do you accept your partner for who they are? Sure, your partner might not be licking every part of the arriving guest's body, which I would really hope not. And if they are, I don't know. Let's work on that later. But do you accept your partner for who they are? If they're introverted and you're a little bit more extroverted, are you accepting of the fact that they stay behind and maybe patiently wait for others to approach them? Or do you get annoyed at the fact that they don't take more initiative? Something to think about. The last one she goes on to say for, are these actions you take with your person is for better or for worse. So she says, in most cases, pets are home to stay. People love and care for pets of every size, shape, and disposition. She goes on to quote, someone in her study said, she's not exactly a watchdog. She's loving, but easily frightened. Or someone else said, he insists on sleeping on the bed. We have given in. And so she just continues with saying, few pets live with the fear of being betrayed or with the implication that things are just not working out, unlike your person. But this is to say, of course your pets don't feel that way, but just consider how the absence of such fears enhances the trust and connection you feel from them. So she concludes by saying, so think about what you give your pet and maybe how, in addition to improving your health, your pet can improve your relationship. And I really, really like that because people don't really think of pets in connection to relationship. They think about like maybe how a pet would be nice and fun to have, but that's pretty much where it ends. And then people go to adopt pets, but they don't really think about like, wow, how this pet is like personally affecting me, how it can personally affect my relationship. And I'll go into what I'm going to talk about next is the 25 ways your relationship can change when you get a pet, and specifically what to look for to tell if you're ready to get a pet. But I just thought it was really interesting to kind of see how pets do affect relationships more than just adding to the family. It's like when you add to that family, you have to really think about how you're adding to the family and if you're treating your partner the same way you would a pet and making sure there's no resentments there. So I thought that was really interesting to point out. So that's why I shared it. So like I mentioned, that's it for this first segment and just like how in general pets are going to affect our relationships. But in the next segment, I'm going to be talking about the 25 ways pets can actually affect your relationships. I'm also going to be talking about like, if you're dating and you have a pet or you met someone with a pet, like how you compete with a pet or tips on how to introduce your pet to a new partner. So make sure you stick around for that and I'll see you after the break.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, where today we're talking about pets and how they affect relationships. So at the top of the episode, I talked about how pets just in general do impact relationships, whether you're just dating or whether you already have a pet and you introduce them to someone new. Pets affect our relationships in positive and negative ways. And now I'm going to go over the specifics of how pets do that in this segment. Where I talk about the 25 ways your relationship can change when you get a pet. And this is from Bustle. I feel like we're all familiar with that website. They come up with different listicles for multiple different things, but they basically start the article by saying like, when you decide to get a pet with your partner, your relationship will change instantly. From having those initial conversations to picking up a pet, to finally starting your lives together. There's no doubt that this will change our relationship dynamic in a million positive ways. Now, I like that it does focus on positive ways, but I mean, the whole article is pros and cons, so maybe they're just trying to be more positive, but I digress. So number one at the list of the 25 ways a pet can change a relationship is it'll make you stop and think. So they mention they have a therapist come on to their article and give them a couple tips, and the therapist, Katie Leakum, she said that getting a pet is a sort of pact. So by agreeing to get a pet, you're agreeing to be there for its entire lifespan, which could be decades. That's a big deal in the scheme of things, depending on how long you feel your relationship will last. So as a result, adopting a pet can make you really stop and think about the overall health of your relationship, as well as seeing where it goes in the future. So if you haven't had that conversation yet, they said before you get a pet, you need to talk about that because that pet's going to be around for a while. All right. The second contention of, what happens when you own a pet is that you'll be less spontaneous. According to PhD Kelly Condra, she says that spontaneity requires freedom from responsibilities, and pets rely on their humans for all their needs. So she's saying that you can't just jump in the car and go to the beach for the weekend when you have a dog waiting for you at home. You have to, take care of them. There are ways around this, of course, but it's definitely an adjustment, and it can be harder and harder to find a dog sitter because once you find a dog sitter, you have to see if they're the right fit. It's kind of like finding a primary care doctor. Not every doctor is going to work for you and your needs, and not every pet sitter is going to work for you and your dog's needs. So it's definitely a point of contention because let's say that you want to spontaneously go on a trip and you don't already have a pet sitter that you love and trust. That's a huge ordeal to figure out last minute. So you're going to have way less time to be spontaneous. Okay, the third point on the list is that resentment builds. So once you get a pet, each person will have to change their life in some way, which can lead to resentment if everybody isn't fully, 100% on board. So before you make the commitment, have that all-important talk about what a big responsibility it will be and make sure you're both up to the task. And what I recommend is Googling what to do as a new pet owner. And then also I will bring it up, but it's how to tell if you're, as a couple, ready to have a pet if you don't already own one. So yeah, I'll go over that in a minute, but definitely have that conversation and Google how to be ready for a pet. I know a lot of adoption centers actually have articles about if you're ready to be a pet owner. So there's some resources there to use to make sure that you guys are having the appropriate conversation before you own a pet. There's a lot of specifics that go into owning a pet if you don't have one, just so you know. Okay, so number 4 of the 25 ways that a pet can affect a relationship is you'll have more fun, which is, there we go, we got a positive one in there. It says if you have a dog running around the house or a cat doing hilarious things, there's no doubt your life as a couple will be more fun. Pets bring a lot of fun and play into relationships, so they give their humans something to laugh at together and reminisce about in the future, which is essentially what all of us think about when we think about having pets. Okay, now I'm being dismissive of people who don't love pets, but let's say you love plants. They're a little bit different, but you still have to nurture and take care of them. And so that's the first thing you think of when you think about introducing a new family member into the house is how much fun you're going to have. So I'm glad that they brought that up to kind of, give us some positive feedback about why we should actually have a pet. All right. The 5th thing for what can happen if you start to own a pet is that you'll expect more of your partner. And I found this really interesting because, again, we think about the fun stuff. We don't think about how it's actually affecting us as a partner. But basically, resident expert at Chewy.com told Bessel that while you would do anything for your pet, your partner may not be so inclined to do that. So they might not have the same expectations of how to care for a pet. And again, that's one of the questions that you would ask your partner, before you own one. What are your expectations of the pet? How are you going to care for it? So, but at the same time, even if you have that conversation, it's not going to change your expectations of how to care for the pet, or your desire to have them care about it as much as you do. So that can lead to a lot of resentment. So make sure that you're both on the same page, or it's better to have clear discussions over responsibilities if you don't. So I would recommend that as well. It's just like anything else, especially during COVID, we're all experiencing stress in different ways, have different needs. So if you need to reestablish who takes care of the pet, or to establish that in the beginning, now's a good time to do so. Okay, number 6 on the list for how pets can affect your relationship is that you'll get more exercise. I think this is a really good time for that because, if you're not outside being an essential worker or going to work because, your state still requires you to go into the office, you need to get more exercise. I mean, regardless, we're still at home during those non-working hours, and we're usually in a position where we're sitting. So getting more exercise is super important. Your dog obviously has to go out. Take precautions for that. But hopefully you have somewhere small in the neighborhood you can get out and actually walk around. But yeah, it just helps you get out and exercise. And I love that point too, because it can help you and your partner do something else together that's not just the same old thing of sitting in the house. You would actually have to get out of the house and care for someone else. And I don't know, you just talk about the fun things that your dog is doing. And I know you can't walk a cat, but what you can do is maybe come up with like, you can build a new toy that the cat can use in like a small patio setting that's outside, or some sort of enclosure that allows your cat to still be outside. I'm kind of considering that for us because we know our cats shouldn't go outside. So 99% sure that won't happen, but I've been trying to think of ways that the cat can maybe be on the patio in a safe, constructive way. So anyways, I digress. Number 7 for ways that like an animal can affect your relationship is you'll just have to communicate more. And that's never a bad thing, actually, in my opinion. But my opinion aside, a health and wellness expert at Maple Holistics told Bustle that communication between the two of you needs to rise to the occasion when you decide, how to handle the care for your pet. So from deciding who will let the dog out to who will pick up more cat food. Caleb goes on to say that no one wants to feel like they're doing all the heavy lifting in the relationship because you are adding a family member. That is how people see pets typically. You have to decide like as if it were a child. Who's going to care for this child on this day because this is what my schedule looks like. You need to have that same conversation. Okay, so listed as number 8 for the 25 ways that a pet can affect your relationship is there may be jealousy. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, especially if you're a pet owner before you meet someone. Your partner may be jealous of how you treat your animal versus how you treat them. So, they just go on to say that it can come from both sides. Like if you're feeling neglected in your relationship, but your partner is spending all the time with the animal, you can build a little resentment for your pet. But usually that just takes a few small adjustments so nobody feels ignored. But don't feel weird if you feel jealous of your partner for liking a pet more or for treating the pet better. Honestly, that's completely normal. And I liked reading it here because it does normalize feeling jealous of an animal. Even though, these animals aren't just animals, they're family, okay? All right. So number 9 for different things that can happen when you own a pet is that things will get serious. So if your relationship didn't feel serious before, getting a pet will take it to a whole new level. And we kind of mentioned that before, right? Like you have to be committed to have a pet with a partner, or if you're going to get with someone, your partner has to actually really want to have a pet in their lives because that's an extension of you, right? Just like having a child. But just to go on, the article says the dynamic shifts from just having fun with another to taking the commitment between the two of you more seriously. And that's regardless of whether or not, you're in a partnership or going to be in a partnership. It's a huge commitment. So make sure you have that conversation with whoever you're interested in and your partner. All right. Number 10, I've kind of alluded to already, but it can feel like you have a kid when you have a pet, especially if it's a baby. Like it literally is depending on you for support and care and shelter. So the article says, while kids and pets are obviously very different, they both require tons of time and attention, which is why some people view pets as a step to parenthood. That could be a good test, I guess, to see if you can handle like stress and responsibility. But also remember, this is an animal in and of itself, and I wouldn't use it just to test if you can co-parent together. Like make sure there are other factors in place, because if you're just getting this animal to see how well you care for another being, you're affecting this other being's life permanently. And so if you decide that you can't be together and co-parent, then what happens? So definitely make sure that if you want to see if you can co-parent well with your partner, that you have other needs for an animal other than that. All right, so number 11 for 25 ways that your pet can affect your relationship is that it creates a stronger bond. So they also got information from a Dr. Silverman, this Bustle article, and he says the dependent living being becomes a tangible bond that requires shared love and nurturing. So as a result, you may find that you and your partner feel closer than ever. That makes more sense, right? Because now you guys are co-parenting an animal, and have to come together and communicate and decide on what's best for your puppy or for your cat or for your rabbit or parakeet, like anything, any type of animal, even a goldfish, because you still have to feed and care for a goldfish. But, yeah, you're going to feel closer with them, of course, right? Because you have to make those decisions together, and it's both someone you care about, something. I hate saying that. It's it's an animal that you guys both care about. So, of course, you're going to bond over caring for it together, because when you see someone else care for something you do, all you can feel is affection. So, of course, it's going to create a stronger bond. All right. The 12th item on the list for how animals can affect relationships is that negatives can be revealed. So, due to the major lifestyle change and all the new responsibilities, getting a pet can unfortunately reveal some negatives in your relationship. They bring out the unexpected best in a partner, but they could reveal a negative side that is truly unwelcome. So, if your partner isn't helping out, for example, you might be seeing a lazy side you wouldn't have witnessed otherwise. And that can really make you think. But again, just have a conversation about it. And if you notice it, don't try and be resentful or jealous. Just communicate. All right. So number 13 is you might argue. Well, yeah, you're always going to argue in a relationship, whether or not it's about a pet, right? But again, if one of you guys isn't making a big enough effort, don't be surprised if it leads to more arguments. A new pet will almost inevitably bring new conflicts because you're dealing with stuff you haven't dealt with before. So like, whose job is it to scoop the litter box? Or who has to skip happy hour to get home and let the dog out? You'll need to figure these things out so everything remains fair. Which makes sense, right? Just like anything else. Okay, so the next one on the list is positive, which I really like. So you'll learn to work together. I kind of mentioned this in various ways earlier, but they just want to remind you that the relationship shifts to teamwork and caring for and training the new dog. Sorry about that. Kind of trailed off there. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? You got to learn to collaborate and work together. The next one on the list is also saying that you have to compromise. I mean, oftentimes one parent will want the dog to be structured and trained, and the other one will want the dog to be free and untrained. So another thing to have a conversation about. Also, they do recommend in this article that you want to visit a pet trainer before you have a dog, actually, just to see if you could get some advice from them to see different methods of how to train the puppy. Specifically puppy, obviously cats, it's a little harder to find a pet trainer for that. But, yeah, to get advice from them to see what kind of parent you'll be. The next item on the list is that you'll gain a shared experience. And we kind of already went over, like, it bonds you, it brings you closer together. 18 says your relationship will feel even more meaningful, which is great. I mean, that's a positive way to look at having a pet. They have another quote here, and it says, having a shared description of what you do and why means the story you have about your life is connected. So a shared description of what you do is like taking care of a pet together. It means it can provide more meaning and purpose in your lives and add to what you already have in common. So it becomes a part of your narrative. It becomes a part of your story, like owning a pet together and the stories about your pet. So that's how they're saying that building that kind of positive narrative really helps your relationship feel even more meaningful. And I 100% agree to that. I mean, there's so many stories about the family pets I have in my lives and, trying to write a dog to the dog understanding your name. So let's say you haven't seen him in a while, he recognizes you or recognizes your name when someone calls it out. Like, there's a lot of special moments. And so if you recreate that with your partner, of course, it's going to make your bond stronger, but it's also going to give you a more positive narrative on your relationship in general because you have all those happy moments. 19 on the list is your roles will become defined. So in order to make the experience a good one, you'll have to figure out a few mutually agreed upon roles and rules, which is like who's a dog walker, who picks up the poop. And then once you do, it'll be a sign that you're working together and communicating effectively, which is what we all want in relationships, right? The last few are just like obvious, but I will read them out because they're good reminders. It's always a good reminder to remember like how positive and healthy relationships work. But number 20 is there will be stress. So greater job functions of the household may mean more stress or more to negotiate. So just kind of take it easy on each other and try and be positive. Maybe listen to the podcast I did previously where it's like how to fight smarter. So if you really care about having a pet cared for in a specific way or who does what role, take it from a positive side, and then the conversation will end positively as well. Number 21 is you'll spend more time together. So especially when you're taking care of a puppy, you're going to spend more time like taking care of the puppy. You're going to learn how to feed it. You're going to learn when to take it on walks, who's picking up the poop, like I mentioned before. But it even means like, for cats too, like you really do have to pay attention to their moods and their anxiety, because with cats, people just assume that they're fine, they can handle themselves on their own. That's a huge misconception. There's a lot of cats out there who need a lot of TLC, tender love and care, and you have to pay attention to how they're reacting to the new environment. Otherwise it can go really dismissed, and then you have cats with anxiety disorders, and then people don't know how to handle those, and then that's when they get put up for adoption or they get left, which is just sad. So make sure you're not forgetting the cats out there too and how to take care for them as well. Number 22, you can end up spending less time together due to all the care and responsibilities. So just be aware of that too. You're not always going to be bonding with your partner in these experiences. You might actually be taking more of the brunt of it if your partner has a longer commute and can't make it home, or if they travel a lot. It really depends on your guys' schedules. So just be willing to take on more responsibilities than you planned on. That'll really help prepare you mentally for having a pet. Number 23 is your sleeping arrangements can change. And, this is obvious, but people, again, just think about the fun stuff about having a pet. But, man, I remember all those times growing up, like, mostly we had cats in the house, and cats do. They sleep all over the bed. Then you worry about the litter on their paws and where they've been. They get on counters. But yeah, back to sleeping arrangements, like, definitely can change because your cat, like, has to. Like, and I'm saying when a cat has to do something, they do it. They sleep on your face. So, and, cats are nocturnal, so they're staying up all night. Like, are you and your partner, do you stay up all night, or is that going to keep you up? Like, you have to really decide on what the right pet is for you, which is why I'll mention those at the end of the episode. But, okay, the last two on the list is there will be more financial stress. Well, yeah, pets are so expensive, and if you don't know that, then I'm telling you now. There is a statistic, and I forgot where I read it. I was doing all this research. I hope it comes up later because I can't remember at the top of my head. But it was saying for a new kitty, it's like around $2,000 in the first year, depending on like if it's spayed and if it has all its proper shots. And the same for puppies, except I think puppies are more expensive. They're about like $3,000 to $4,000 in the first year of their life. So just really keep that in mind when you decide to get a newborn. All right. And the fifth and final, which is just so joyous, even the picture looks cute. You'll feel like a family. You'll feel more like a family. So we got another quote here, and it reads, even if you've been a couple, for a few years, you can feel like two ships passing in the same night sometimes. Ooh, that's a poetic way to put it. It goes on to say, a pet can really help connect a couple and merge your lives. The joint responsibility and admiration for your pet can bring you closer and unite the two of you in a more official way than you anticipate. So for better or worse, getting a pet can change your relationship. There's added stress and tough conversations to have, but the benefits still outweigh the negatives, especially since pets inevitably bring you closer. They really can, or they can pull you apart. I hate to end it on that note, but they are right that they can bring you closer together, but that's only if you both like pets, both have an agreement about how it's going to be to care for your pets, and especially the bed thing. If you're okay with having a pet on the bed, then you're good to go. Otherwise, that's a real conversation that you need to have before it can bring you closer as a family. Okay, great. So those are the specifics on how a pet can actually affect your family or affect your coupledom. In the next segment, I'm going to actually be talking about what you do if you have to compete with a partner's pet. Let's say that you are meeting someone and you don't have a pet that they do. And then also tips on how to introduce your pet to a new partner. If you're the person with a fur baby and you need to tell your partner how to get along with your pet, then I'm going to tell you guys how to introduce your pet to a new partner. So stick around for after the break, and I'll see you guys then.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. So throughout the episode, I've been talking about the impact that pets can make on relationships, and even if you're just dating, how it still affects the conversations you have with the person you're interested in moving forward. So in addition to talking about like how it just actually impacts relationships and the conversations you want to have before you get a pet, I want to talk about how to deal with competing with a pet. So let's say that you don't own a pet and you meet someone that does. So how do you actually compete with that pet and find a healthy way to establish a relationship? Okay, so let's start with some of the ways that we might feel like we're competing with our partner's pets. So I found an article on PetLifeToday.com, and they did a survey with over 1,000 people in a relationship with a pet owner. And they asked how they felt about their partner's their furry friend, and how often pets got in the way of physical intimacy, and what, if anything, would compel them to get rid of their pets. So here's the study. So according to people that have pets in their couple, in their partnership, only 11.2% have a pet. 3.3, sorry, I should clarify. 11.2%, only one person has a pet. And then 3.3%, only my partner has a pet. 18.4%, we both have our own pet. And 67.1%, we have a pet together. So, out of that total, 32% of couples had at least one pet owned by only one partner, which is pretty interesting, because then that means most people say that they have a pet together, which is, surprising me actually, because without a partner, I guess it is harder to get a pet, but I know so many pet owners who are single, so that statistic actually surprised me. But they said according to more than 4,900 people currently in a relationship, 67% of couples had a pet together, and over 18% each had a pet of their own. Overall, nearly 1 in 3 couples had at least one pet owned by only one pet owner. So that was pretty interesting. But then they go on to say how people feel about their partner's pets, percentage who like their partner's pet. And then they divide it by pet type and respondent's gender. So the pet owner of a dog, if she's a woman, 93.7% like their partner's pets. Now for men, it's 96.2. Now I think what's really interesting is that for the cats, on the other hand, if you are a woman, you're 96.4% more likely to like a man who has a cat. And for men, you're only 89.2% more likely to like your partner having a cat. So that was really interesting. Also, by pet ownership, we both have our own pet is 94.5% likely to like someone else's pet, and only my partner has a pet. You're still 90.2% likely to like someone who has a pet. So, I mean, there's really not a lot of discrepancy there. But another little interesting study that they did is by the time spent on their pet. So the partners are saying people spend time with their pet just enough is 95.2. So a lot of people feel like there's equalization between the time spent with them and then the pet. But other people say that time spent is too little on the pet is 95.3%. So I'm a little confused at how this is working out here. And then people that said too much time spent on the pet is 83.5%. So it seems to me that what this statistic is saying, that out of all the participants, out of all 4,900 participants, everyone said a little bit of everything, right? So that's a little confusing for statistics, but I think it makes sense because what it's actually saying is that people kind of just equally think that people either spend too much or too little or just enough time with their pet because they're probably thinking that they need to spend time with that pet. But just to keep going with the study, it does mention that people don't just love their pets. It's like, just besides taking them on walks and making sure they're fed, apparently Americans spend a combined $70 billion on their pets every year, including expensive pet food, daycare, and spa-like grooming packages. For most people, pets aren't just animals, they're an extension of the family, which is very true. And according to around 96% of men and nearly 94% of women, people like the pets their partners bring to the relationship, which is great, what is I just described. But many describe their personalities as playful, loving, and affectionate. So while not as common, some people found their partner's pets to be aggressive. Around 11% found their partner's pets to be aggressive, 17% found them annoying, or 19% were jealous of their pets, like I was just talking about. Okay, so the study continues with different questions about owning a pet. So they asked, how often does the pet stay in the bedroom when you and your partner sleep in the same bed? How often does the pet stay in your bedroom when you have sex? And actually, let me read that statistically. So how often does the pet stay in your bedroom when you have sex with your partner? Owning a dog, 39% said never. 17% said rarely. Sometimes is 20%. Often is 13%, and always is 9%. So I would say most people say never, but I also have to wonder if they're answering that honestly, because a lot of people would consider that awkward to have your pet while you're having sex. So it's not a question that you're likely to be honest about. As well as for cats, I found this interesting too. The highest percent is never, so never having a cat in the bedroom when you have sex with your partner is 31.3%. Then rarely is 21.8%. Sometimes is 28.5%, and often is 12%, and always is 6.3%, which I found really interesting. But they say that cats do ruin sexual intimacy between partners. And here's the list of, ways that pets can make us feel like we're competing in relationships. So, of course, the first one was sex in the study done to see if pets are actually affecting your sex life and if you have to compete with them for bed space. And then it goes on to whether or not pets affect how emotionally unavailable your partner is. So it's time partner spends on their pet versus does your partner have a social media account for their pet? The study goes in to say that 84% of people said that their partner doesn't have a social media account for their pet, but then the study combines the two and says, does the partner spend, or the time partner spends on their pet versus whether the pet has a social media account. So no social media account, but does their partner spend more time on their pet? And 76% of people said just enough time is spent with the pet if they don't have a social media account for that pet. But let's say you do have a social media account for that pet, and it looks like it's split between just enough and too much. So 47% of partners say that people that have social media accounts for their pets spend just enough time with their pets, but just right behind it is 31% spend too much time with their pets. So there's a little bit of, there's a fine line there. But just to sum this article up, just to give you some statistics, 40% of people felt in competition with their partner's pet for attention at 22%, affection at 18%, love at 17%, time at 15%, care at 12%, appreciation 5%, and money 5%. It's really interesting that appreciation and money are about the same. But the study just goes on to say like other ways that we feel like we're competing for our partner and our partner's attention versus their pet's attention. And it just goes in to talk about relationship satisfaction and how partners are actually like statistically affecting our relationships. But to get to the fun stuff, now I want to talk about like how to introduce your partner to a pet that you already have. So that's a lot of things that single people with pets have a struggle with. So I wanted to go over some tips for how to introduce your pet to your new partner. It's actually a really interesting article. It's a really fun name. It's from bowwowinsurance.com.au. So I'm assuming this article is Australian. But the first article for how to introduce your pet to your partner is, it says some pets, it can be a real challenge allowing a new partner into their life. So, and some are more easygoing. It says dogs are usually more territorial and jealous than cats. So keep that in mind when you're introducing your partner, that they may stake their claim and go alpha male, or, even if they're female, alpha female on your partner, whoever you're bringing into the home. It also recommends to think about the situation from your pet's perspective. Now, I know non-animal people may not understand this, but hopefully if you're a pet owner, you do. You tend to think about stuff from your pet's situation because you consider them more like family. But with a new partner coming in, your pet's routine is going to change too. So like we mentioned at the top of the episode, how relationships changes because of pets. I mean, if you already own a pet and you're introducing a new partner, it's the same situation, right? Like their routine is going to change too with you maybe spending nights away from home, or, you change feeding times to accommodate your new partner. I don't know how else to say that. Then, they're going through changes too, which could create anxiety. Oh, and now like you're going to be sharing your bed, right? So that's going to change their routine as well. And adding a new person is it's hard for a pet. So how do you actually like transition well and introduce your partner in a safe way for your pet? Here are a couple tips. They recommend, the first thing they recommend is kind of funny because you can't really, maybe you can know this up front, but date a pet lover. They're saying it just makes it easier. If you already own a pet, like accepting and bonding with one another has to work from both sides. So your new person and your pet. So introducing someone to someone that already likes animals as much as you do will be for the best. The second tip is to be patient. I think this is something that's hard to remember in terms of, again, if you're an animal lover and let's say you're dating someone who doesn't love animals as much as you do. One, that might be, a deal breaker, which is totally fine. Feel free to have whatever boundaries you need to have. But let's say you're more open to someone who likes pets but never thought about owning one. So remember to just be patient because the first impression is very important to your animal as well as to you because you care about your animal so much. So just be kind to yourself and to your new partner and your pet, and remember that they can freak out just because someone's invading their space without asking for permission first. So if your pet at first does not agree, try again. But just be patient. You can't force a friendship between your new partner and your pet. And oftentimes, like I mentioned before, pets can be territorial or like cats tend to be skittish. So just give it time and don't freak out if it doesn't happen naturally or at first. Just give yourself some patience. The next step is to introduce the smell first. So that's really important. Pet owners kind of already know this when you introduce new friends to them. But let's say you're a new pet owner and you haven't had a pet before, you're not going to know that smells are important. So if your pet tends to be wary of strangers, bring a t-shirt or a small towel with your partner's smell at home first. And then you let your pet smell it and leave it lying around so your pet can sniff it from time to time. I'd especially recommend for romantic partners, you're going to put it in the bed because that's a space that a lot of animals like to occupy. So put it in your bed so that they get used to that smell in your bed. And then reward your furry friend with treats or a pat when it sniffs the item. And look for relaxed body language from your pet, like before introducing the person as a whole. You want to make sure that your pet seems relaxed around that smell that's already been introduced. And so associating your partner's smell with something nice and comforting like a treat will create a positive association that your pet is likely to remember on the first meeting with your new partner. So that's a way to ease the transition for sure. And then they go into saying that location really matters when you're introducing your new partner to your pet. So it says to be on the safe side with dogs. You might like to choose a neutral territory instead of your house for the first meeting. If your dog is wary of strangers or is fearful or territorial when strangers invade their space, they suggest that you meet at your favorite dog park. It's somewhere where they're comfortable, they've already been. So introducing your partner there will actually be a lot easier. They say go for a walk, make friends, let your partner play and throw the ball for your dog. You may have to repeat this a few times, but eventually it should work out. Now, if you have a cat or if you have a bird, I don't know, gerbils, guinea pigs, don't know too much about them, and the article doesn't go too much into doesn't talk about not having a dog or a cat, any other kind of animals, which is rude. Just kidding. But if you do have a cat, I would definitely suggest the t-shirt, like something that smells like your partner so that they can get introduced. And obviously techniques for meeting a cat is to put your hand out, let them come to you. And eventually, if the cat feels comfortable with you, you just have to give it time. So there's really no way to push that when it comes to cats. Okay, so the next recommendation or tip is how to say hello for the first time. So it's saying don't let your partner force him or herself upon your pet. If you introduce the t-shirt first, your pet will recognize the smell. Allow your pet to approach and sniff out the new person, which should be calm and relaxed. Let your pet dictate the speed of the approach. Give it time to work through its apprehension. Especially with cats, the best approach is to ignore them when coming into the room. This will increase the chances of your cat going over and investigating the new person. So ask your partner to approach your pet in a crouched or seated position. Bending or looming over a dog or cat can come across as threatening. So your partner should avoid talking to and staring at your pet, as most cats and dogs find that threatening. And dogs don't like to be patted on the head, but often enjoy a pat on the chin or chest. So your pet will let you know when it feels safe. Rest assured, most dogs will come around after 2 to 3 interactions with the new person. That's really good to know. Cats obviously take a little bit longer depending on the cat, but this is something you can do to maybe sweeten the deal, and that's what it's titled. The next trick is to just sweeten the deal. So make it a routine for your new partner to offer you a pet high-value treat. Oh my God, to offer your pet a high-value treat every time they meet, or even just from time to time. For most pets, that'll break the ice. However, if your dog refuses the treat, that could be a sign that your dog is very stressed about the situation. So just make sure, again, that you take it at their pace, which, again, might seem silly to non-pet owners, but just let your animal kind of control the tension and the pace of the situation. If they feel uncomfortable by your partner, just keep trying the t-shirt trick. I swear it works. I've actually done it myself. So yeah, just take the time and patience that you need for your animal. Definitely it goes on to say just stuff that we've kind of already covered, but manage jealousy. Yeah, much like your partner can feel jealous you're spending too much time with your pet can feel jealous that you're spending too much time with your new partner. So make sure that if you're noticing that your dog or your cat is showing signs of stress and that's new, it means that they've recognized that your patterns and routines have changed, and so that makes them anxious. Any sort of change in the household will make an animal very anxious. So make sure you start off slowly and see how your pet reacts when you and your partner just hug a bit or kiss each other when they come over. If the animal reacts with like a bad behavior, just move in baby steps. So, obedience training helps with that too. If you've already trained your dog to kind of be good with strangers, that's going to come into effect here as well. So also avoid aggression. So if your pet reacts aggressively, like stop the introduction immediately and just go from there. Maybe do some training or maybe do some more Googling for some tips on how to slowly introduce the type of breed that you have, especially with cats and dogs. Different breeds react differently in terms of aggression or in terms of like territory and staking their territory. So if you read up on that breed, you might be able to find more examples of how to introduce that cat to new family members, which includes your partner, because even if they're not family, I mean, that's what you plan on, right? Or perhaps you don't, but if you plan to have them over more than once, then I would definitely recommend that. All right. And the last two on here are to just maintain your pet's routine as close as you can to possible. If you change your routines just before bringing your new partner home, you need to give your pet time to adjust. Like I said before, changing routines has a great impact on our pet's behavior. So try and keep it as close to regularly scheduled as possible. Maybe even include your partner in that. If they've already done the introductory meet and greet with the animal, you can take them on the walk with you and make sure that obviously your dog isn't being aggressive, and then you can just let them come on the walk with you versus picking up their poop or trying to feed them. Just allow the same space. And then, that kind of leads to the last one, is just create a bond. So get your partner to help share in the chores so your partner feels included and your pets start associating nice things with the new person in your life. Playtime comes a little bit later, but playtime with the pet, if you have a laser for your cat or a little feather, or maybe even have your partner bring in the new toy you bought for your pet and to play with your pet, because then that's a positive association with you as well, right? So it just mentions to work towards building time where you can leave your partner and pet without your supervision. And I think those are all really good tips, because I feel like we don't really think about those things. Again, when we have a pet, we just assume everything's going to work naturally, but that's not true. Your pets have their own personalities as well, and pet owners already know this, but so because they have their own personality, they have their own routine, when you introduce someone new to that, obviously it's going to shift for them as well. So take that into consideration. Be considerate towards your pet. I did skip a couple, but they're things that we already went over. But just remember to share the bedroom and bed. Practice entering your house with your partner, like we mentioned. Maybe you can bring a toy. And then just watch your pet for any of the, stressors that they might be acknowledging. So, relaxed cat signals look like relaxed ears, whiskers are fanned and pointed sideways, her tail is visible but not tucked, and her posture is up while she lays prone, her head is up. Friendly cat signals are a friendly cat's eyes will be alert and blinking, and their ears are pointing forward. And so I've kind of mentioned that already. And the dog is the same way. They're not going to have their tail tucked behind their legs. They're not going to be in the corner. Their ears won't be up. They obviously won't be growling. So just make sure you know the signs of your breed for how they respond to new changes and reactions, and how they respond if they're aggressive or if they're shy or anxious. And just look for those signs when you're introducing your partner. Okay, so in this, just to recap real quick, in this segment we talked about, different ways we feel like we can be competing for our partner's attention when it comes to their pets. And then we talked about safe guidelines for how to introduce a new partner to your household if you already own a pet, and making sure you're keeping your pet in consideration when having a new partner come to the house. And then after this break, I'm actually going to talk about how to tell if your relationship can handle getting a pet together if you don't have one, or if you both have pets, the tips for blending your family. So, and then I'm going to talk about the perfect pets for travelers and people with anxiety. So make sure you stick around to the end of the episode, because who doesn't love talking more about pets? I'll see you guys then.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the GSMC Relationship Podcast. So throughout this entire episode, we've been talking about pets. So how pets impact relationships, how the pros and cons of having a pet in a relationship, or, how we compete with our partners about our pets. And also how to introduce your pet to a new partner. But right now, in our last segment, we're going to talk about if your relationship can handle getting a pet together, tips for blending your family pets, and if you already have them, and the perfect pets for travelers and people with anxiety. So let's get started. We're going to talk about how to tell if your relationship can handle getting a pet together. And I mentioned this earlier in the episode about if you're trying to research, if you should be getting a pet, this is definitely one of the ways you can, kind of Google that and see if you can handle even getting a pet at this point. Okay, so this is actually fun. This article is on Vice, and the title of the article is How to Tell If Your Relationship Can Handle Getting a Pet Together. And it popped up exactly what I typed in. But Rachel Czar, a Chicago-based therapist, they conducted this interview with her. So the questions are going to be her answers. And the first question is, how soon is too soon? And she says, when it comes to pet ownership, you need to think long-term, like we've already established. She said this is particularly hard for couples in their 20s and 30s because a lot can happen in a decade. So dogs have an average lifespan of about 10 to 13 years, and cats have a lifespan of about 15 years. So she says if you're not willing to have the vulnerable and scary conversation about where the relationship is going and what you want to do with your futures, it's way too soon. And it almost goes without saying, but she continues and says, how much you trust your partner is a big factor too. So examine whether your partner is keeping their promises, and if they say they're going to help you with something, do they follow through? So she recommends doing a low stakes test, do a low stakes test run with a fish or a plant to see if they actually uphold their end of the bargain and take care of it when they say they're going to. If you decide that your relationship is ready for pet parenthood, a spokesperson for the Toronto Humane Society, Hannah Stropa, she suggests holding off for at least a couple months. You can research whether getting a cat or dog makes sense for you, and if you're still really interested in a pet after that cooling off period, that's a good sign. So I think that's really interesting because, okay, yes, we know by now it's really important to have a conversation about owning a pet with your partner because it requires a longevity. You need to know it requires knowing that your partner is responsible and that you trust them. But so you made the decision. Now wait, more waiting. But that's good, right? That means if you decide to wait and you still want the pet, that means you really want the pet. And you probably have done the research for the right type of pet that you want. That works for both you and your partner. The second question, the answer is, can you even afford it? So this was the article I was talking about earlier. I'm so glad that it's in this one. But they say a ballpark cost of owning a puppy for the first year is about $2,600 and about $1,900 for a kitten. So I'm really glad I found these statistics because I was awfully wrong earlier, and I do apologize about that. But thanks for sticking around. We got our facts straight. But in addition, those are just normal costs for basic care, so spade and all the shots, and making sure that if they have any diseases that those are kind of taken care of too. Because when you adopt, fortunate for you, the adoption center usually already knows like the type of neglect the cat has gone through. It's already been to the vet, so they usually have those costs up front. But you can have hidden costs too, such as unexpected vet bills or medicine for your pet down the line. Like, again, do your research, know your breed for cat or dog, or for any other animal that you're owning, know what they could be prone to and if you can afford those costs to fix that later. They also want you to ask and remind yourself, is your life pet friendly? So cats tend to live longer than dogs, and getting a dog is a bigger time commitment and lifestyle adjustment. So what works best for you? Again, know your breed, know what type of animal you're getting, because if you're likely to have a drink after work, who's going to take care of the dog? Or what about when you're sick or traveling? So you should definitely have a contingency plan if you get evicted or if you need to move out with little notice, because there's, especially nowadays, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a great economy out there, which sucks to admit, but it's true. So you need to be able to like outsource and find a home for your pet, and just in case that needs to happen. And that's a good thing to think about if you're financially stable enough to have a pet. Like, will you be able to board it? Do you have a family member you can go to? Like, it affects your finances in such a huge way. And like your life being pet friendly, like having more people in your lives that have pets is a good thing to have, just in case you need someone to take on your pet for a little while. So this next suggestion is actually pretty funny, but I'm willing to consider it because I consider pets family, but it's a pet prenup. So SAR suggests decide ahead of time whether your relationship is solid, what the plan is for your pet if you break up, but also put it in writing so no one misremembers, quote unquote, anything. So she's seeing custody battles in her office over pets that might as well be children. People get really attached, which, like we've talked about before, definitely people get attached and they definitely think that their pets are family, like I just mentioned. So I can definitely see that when it comes down to the nitty gritty and something does happen when you guys break up, that if you both equally care for the animal, there's going to be a lot of tension there on who gets the dog or not. So, and I've seen that happen in real life. It's actually really sad. So a prenup actually isn't really a bad idea. But she goes on to say, Rachel Zara goes on to say, unlike a will or an actual prenup agreement, a pet prenup isn't legally binding, but it helps to have a clear plan for custody. And, otherwise you'll be dealing with the heartache of losing a pet. So it's just less confusing to have that all written out and to make sure, the transferring ownership and like sorting out vet records, like all of that stuff makes a lot of sense to have it like at least written out so you can hold your partner accountable, even if it's not legally binding. And usually judges will favor that as well. If this is actually an issue that actually gets brought up in court, judges will usually favor the predetermined agreement. So, that's on how to decide if you're ready for a pet. If you're ready for all of those consequences and you wait it out maybe like 6 months after you've decided to get a pet and you still want to deal with all of the potentials, then they say you're ready to have a pet. All right, what I want to talk about next is tips for blending your family pets. So earlier I talked about like why we can feel competitive and how to deal with like if you're trying to introduce your partner to your new pet, but what if you both need to introduce your pets to each other? What do you do then? So if you're trying to blend and establish harmony between both of your pets, that introduces a whole new playing field, because you not only have to get your pet to like your partner, your pets have to like each other too. So there's more, according to this article, sorry, I should start with that. It's from rover.com. Self-identified as the dog people, but they say the first meeting and beyond and establishing harmony between both of your pets. They talk about that there's more to blending your pet family than just getting your pets acquainted with new human roommates. When it comes to introducing your pet to a new four-legged playmate, there's lots of ways to break the ice. So for puppy love, for future canine roommates, like if you both have puppies, start with a few leashed walks together. Go to a neutral spot where neither dog feels vulnerable. And after success with casual walks, again, take time, and that's advice from earlier. Progress to a play date in a fenced area. Avoid having food or toys out as these can lead to fighting, and begin with both dogs on their leashes until they seem comfortable with relaxed body posture. So ultimately, they say that the goal is to have them be comfortable together, so don't be pushy about it. And keep the meeting short, about an hour, and make sure that they end up in a happy, playful, positive place. So even though it needs to be short, make sure it ends well. Let's say you're introducing two cats together. What you're going to start with is, it's a whole other ball game is what they say. I just read that and it's hilarious because it's true. Cats are definitely different. So cats don't really like sharing their space. This might not be news to current cat owners, but it's true. So this leads to the cat like marking their territory, which usually means with urine, which is not great, or even fighting. So it could be way less dramatic than that. I mean, some cats just simply sit and stare at each other and give each other a few sniffs. A fairly common reaction falls somewhere between the extremes of both cats sniffing each other, hissing, and then walking away. But be on the signs of true aggression when that happens, like flattening ears, growling, or spitting and crouching. Now, it doesn't mention this in the article, but I have had cats meet each other, and I've watched videos about cats meeting each other. And the best way to get them comfortable with one another is the t-shirt trick. So have a t-shirt of your partner, bring it to your house, introduce your cat to that smell, and have them become more and more comfortable with that smell in different areas of your house. Now, once you've done that, and once you've introduced your partner to the house themselves, like as just them being over and more regularly, then what you want to do to actually introduce the cats together is to take the shirt that you had of your partner's, make sure it's a shirt they don't actually really love, because it can get ruined in this situation. But you're going to put that shirt into the cat carrier with the cat before you go over to your partner's house. Now you're going to allow your cat to stay actually in the cat carrier when you get to your partner's house so that the cat whose home it belongs to, like your partner's cat, doesn't feel threatened. Now your cat may feel a little threatened. This is natural and normal because, again, they don't really like people who aren't their family. But if this is inevitable and it's going to happen, it needs to happen, right? So you're going to keep your cat in your carrier with the shirt of your partner so that it associates the smell that it's comfortable with now this new this partner's house, and then eventually with the cat therein. So you can either do one trip like that and then it ends well, or you might have to do multiple trips like that for it to end well. But again, treats really help, smells really help. So vice versa, your partner's going to do that with their cat to your house, do it a couple times, take a few breaks, just have your partner come over without their cat, and then eventually they'll be able to bring their cat over more often. And until that point where they're comfortable with each other, that's about how long it takes with cats, which is unfortunate. But I mean, again, these are the decisions that you're making when you get the cat if you don't already have a partner. Okay, let's say that you have a dog and your partner has a cat. What do you do? So for the first meeting, the article rover.com, they say, bring the dog into the house on a leash and see how he reacts to the smell of the cat. Slowly take him to the cat, but don't invade her designated space. So the cats at the house, they need to have a designated safe, quiet room that will be cat only. And this is a space where she has access to her food, her litter box, and high areas to jump as an escape route so she feels comfortable. So when the dog comes over, make sure he comes into that space, but don't rush the interaction and wait to see how they each react. Once they've had a chance to respond to one another, call the dog over and have him sit. Work on holding his attention and keeping him calm while the cat is around so he understands this is expected behavior. And don't initially leave the pair alone together unattended. While you're away and at bedtime, the cat should be in her space and the dog created in his or her own space. So when dogs meet cats, new cats, they tend to respond in one of three ways. Play, prey, or cautious avoidance. Kind of like humans, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Some dogs, especially young, small ones, immediately see a cat as a new playmate. And while that seems ideal, the cat may not share the dog's enthusiasm. So it's more important to monitor playtime between the two. Other dogs have very strong prey drive, causing them to see the cat as something to hunt. And similarly, cats can view the dog as a predator and immediately be defensive. So If the dog is downright afraid of the cat, especially if the dog is on the older side and the cat is younger, your kitty may react to this response by watching your dog from a distance or approaching him very cautiously, which could be a good thing because it means, they're not terrified of him yet. But basically, this is all to say, just take your time, be patient, know the breed of your animal, how they respond to stress, because that's what this is. You're introducing a new stressor into their life, and make sure you take these tips and tricks and maybe Google for yourself how to introduce your animal to your partner's new animal. But I thought that was really interesting for learning how to blend, because you know what? It's kind of like children. Like if you have kids, you're going to learn how to blend in with new families, and pets are just as important, as we all know. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to go into for our episode today was to talk about different breeds that are good for travelers and for people who are anxious, because right now we're a little bit of both. Some people still have to travel, which makes us more anxious, or if, you're in a certain situation with whatever is happening during COVID, you're probably stressed out. So I thought animals for anxiety would be a good thing to look at. But let's start with travel, because I know my partner still has to travel even though COVID, so that sucks. And these are the breeds that we've looked at for different pet potentials. So I'm reading from this article, and it's called Best Pets for Frequent Travelers. There we go. And it's from simplywoman.com. But as far as cats, people usually think cats are the perfect animal to get if you're a frequent traveler. And while people aren't wrong, again, let me reiterate, some cats do have anxiety disorders just like any other animal. So it's really good to know, cat by cat, if your cat has any of those symptoms. That way you don't travel just thinking you can with a cat. But the cats that they specifically recommend are having a Persian or a British Shorthair. They say cats are incredibly independent by nature, but these ones specifically don't have a hard time being on their own. So you can't essentially leave them all alone. You do need someone to come in from time to time for feeding and cleaning purposes, but those specifically do better on their own. There's certain bird species you can have as a pet if you travel a lot. They recommend the intelligent birds like the cockatoo or the African gray parrot. In fact, they said petsarethe.best.net is a place to go to decide what the right bird species is for you, which is a good thing to have, I think. But yeah, they said basically though lovebirds, budgies, and a few other small species in pairs are the easiest to take care of when you're not there. As for fish, now, it's the fishbowl that needs to be cleaned out, people don't really consider fish a lot of care, but if they have aquariums or if you have just a basic fish tank, it obviously needs to get cleaned, and you do need to take care of your fish, feeding it. So, getting a smaller one is better, and species for that, are goldfish or betta fish, your typical average small, domesticated, if I can say that, type of fish. The next pet that they recommend, which I find really interesting, is the hermit crab. So, the hermit crab, they say, make excellent pets that need little to no human attention, but are fascinating to watch at the same time. So, just in case you want, another living creature, I guess, in your house, then you should definitely get a hermit crab. They can basically take care of themselves. So all of the pets on this list make at least partially independent pets, and they're good to have if you do travel a lot. But make sure that you remember that no pet is truly independent. So if they were, they wouldn't be your pet, right? So you need to be home, or you need to make sure that you get care for your pet if you're not able to be home. Just as a warning and a reminder, as a pet lover myself. Now we're going to go over the best pets to have to reduce anxiety. And I thought, again, that this was super important because we're in times right now where everybody is stressed out. So the article I got for this is from ABC News, and the title of the article is, Can Any Animal Be a Therapy Animal? Army vet Darren Welker says his ducks help him with PTSD and depression. So I thought that was quite a hook for a tagline on an article. But basically, according to Glenn Miller, spokesman for Pet Partners, He said that therapy pets can include dogs, cats, rabbits, birds, guinea pigs, rats, miniature pigs, llamas, alpacas, horses, donkeys, and mini horses. Now, I know a lot of people, there's been controversy over emotional needs pets and the actual need for them, and the paperwork that you can get online, whether that's valid or not. But unlike service animals, therapy animals don't help their owners perform tasks. So they're a little bit different, and they are necessary for certain people that are diagnosed with, severe anxiety and depression. And you can read more about that. I'm not really here to defend emotional needs animals, but I did want to go over like the animals that have been kind of claimed to be good animals for therapy and people who are anxious, because in case that you are, here's some animals that you can look into. So I thought it was interesting that outside of, dogs and cats, ducks have been considered a quite relaxing animal, and they comfort Welker, the band that I mentioned before, the vet. He said that they're relaxing to him and they comfort him, and he holds him like a baby, which really keeps him entertained for hours at a time. Just a little background, Welker served in Iraq in 2005 and returned home with a back injury that required surgery, as well as post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. So he's had ducks fenced in his yard since March, and will argue his case for keeping them, ever since. So another animal that doesn't seem quite likely to be a good pet for, if you have anxiety, a therapy pet, was bunnies. So there are 4.5-year-old therapy bunnies that live on the 13th floor of the NYU Langone. Oof, I'm horribly mispronouncing that, I'm sure. But the Langone Medical Center. And according to Gwen Freed, a manager of horticultural therapy services at NYU, she claims that these bunnies they've seen patients, like their whole demeanor changes. So sometimes doctors recommend the rabbits, and sometimes the patients ask to see them, she found. So I found that really interesting. The next one is llamas. And Lori Gregory, who volunteers for Llama Rojo at the NTN Peaks Therapy Llamas and Alpacas, takes him to hospice patients and children who have mental and emotional problems. And the people just respond that they look into their eyes, and it's pretty wonderful to be able to do that with someone that doesn't ask anything of you. And while Lori Gregory can't personally detect a change in the patients that Rojo meets, she says that nurses often tell her their most introverted patients become animated around llamas. So you never know. Maybe just go get a llama, just like you do. The next one on the list is dogs. Obviously, it's pretty common to have dogs. And again, there's specific breeds that are better than others. Like, do not have a dog that has a strong temperament, like Huskies and or Australian Shepherds. But, like Labradors seem to be more patient. Smaller dogs can be difficult as well because they tend to have more temper tantrums than other typical dogs. But yeah, definitely go with Golden Retriever or Lab if you can for a dog. And then another interesting one is horses. Now, I've heard this before, like horses, I grew up with horses, so I've noticed this before, but they really can calm people down. The mere brushing, the time it takes to take care of a horse can really slow you down. So, but Lyndon Ortiz helped start a veterans program, Heavenly Hooves, a volunteer group that provides equine assisted therapy. So Ortiz, who suffered from PTSD after being hit with an improvised explosive device in Iraq in 2005, started as a volunteer for the group and encouraged fellow veterans to join him. He said it helped him get back into civilian life as he wanted to live it. A quote directly from Ortiz says, "I've seen hope in some of the guys. Some of them are stuck at home not doing anything, just stuck in those four walls. And now they look forward to Tuesdays when they're riding horses." So, and like I said, from personal experience, just the care alone, it kind of helps you take yourself out of your head and your thoughts, because it's such a large animal to take care of. And also you can ride a horse, so that provides some bonding moments for you there as well. But horses are expensive, so I understand not owning a horse. But if you have a ranch nearby you have access to and you follow all protocols, I'd say why not? Try a horse. Ride a horse, right? Anyways, okay, so that's it for our episode on pets. I mean, me and my partner actually really are looking for a pet. We're looking for a cat specifically. We're in the Southern California area. If you know of any good local rescues that we can go to, please contact us at GSMC_relationship. I'd love to hear your recommendations for different cat rescues. Or tell me about the pets that you've had introduced to your partner. Or if you're not a pet person, how do you feel about having a partner that has pets? I love my fur babies that I've previously owned and all my friends' fur babies, so that's another reason why I wanted to do this episode, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you again for tuning in to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you have the time, we'd love if you did a review for us on Apple Podcasts, or if you just subscribe to us in general. That helps us connect and bond with other people who want to know more about relationships and how to improve them, or just talk about them in general. So yeah, make sure you reach out on our Instagram and Twitter. Again, it's GSMC_relationship, and we look forward to hearing from you. See you guys next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.